I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there, and perhaps not any in the whole United States.
It's a Thought Police free zone. The Liberty Lineup radio show, where independent thought just can't be bought.
I'm an American. Red, white, and blue. And I'm a citizen of this world and of heaven. Some things were meant to be together. I believe in faith and freedom. Got a country too. I believe with faith and freedom. We're gonna make it through.
I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there, and perhaps not any in the whole United States.
Welcome to the Thursday segment of the Liberty Lineup with your hosts, Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore of defendingutah.org. This is the Naked Truth segment of the Liberty Lineup, where politics meets principles. Today, right now, we are going to be talking about a lot of hot things about the most corrupt legislators in Utah, which leads us to our segment that we've kind of been teasing for a while about the most corrupt legislators in the state.
I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there, and perhaps not any in the whole United States.
Wow.
Holy cow, who's that guy?
Well, and who was saying that? That was Scott Bradley, Ph.D., who's a constitutional scholar, been run for Senate in several times, and he ran as a Republican against Orrin Hatch. Unfortunately, the citizens of Utah didn't take advantage of that opportunity.
And, I think anyone who gets to know Scott Bradley would agree he is about as good as it gets to understanding the Constitution. And one thing about the Constitution is that you don't have to be a scholar to get it, right?
It's short. It's not like these 1,000-page Obamacare bills. It's just right there in what it is.
But what's great about people like Scott Bradley is that they have taken this simple-to-get document and really spent time with it, understanding its history, to kind of help people not get caught up on nuances, or if people try to twist the document, he can say, well, no, this is how it is and here's why. There is no, I don't want to say there's no greater, but he is among the greatest of the constitutional scholars that we have available here in Utah and probably the nation as well.
Not only does his expertise make that statement profound and effective, but the fact that he is so mild-mannered. He doesn't talk bad about anybody. And so for him to really come out and say something like that is a pretty big thing. He doesn't just say those things willy-nilly.
That's pretty shocking. Maybe he didn't really say that. Maybe I heard that wrong. Let me just play it again and make sure I heard what I thought I heard.
I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there, and perhaps not any in the whole United States.
Holy moly, you really did say that.
But who's he talking about?
I don't know. Maybe we should find out how long do we have till our break. I'm not quite sure. So we have an interview. We interviewed Scott Bradley, and we have a 3-minute clip from that interview that has some very telling information. And it looks like we have 2.5 minutes till our break. So maybe we'll play half this interview, and then we'll continue it after the break. But you're going to want to stick around to hear what this is all about and what the implications are.
I met with Ken Oda. You know Ken, don't you? Kurt Oda. Anyway, he's truly a good guy. I really like Kurt. And anyway, so I met with Kurt, and this was 2 years ago. I met with Kurt about this nullification resolution I had. And, it was 3 pages. There was a...
I'm going to pause there and give some background. So he's talking about when Scott Bradley wanted to put forward in the legislature a resolution about nullification. Now, nullification, if you don't know what that basically is the proper response to federal tyranny in our day. Our state legislators should be nullifying unconstitutional acts of the federal government. It's a very simple concept. It's done regularly, but there are some people who are fighting it in Utah here, even though they should be champions of it. And Scott Bradley wanted to put forth a resolution, not something that didn't even have teeth, but a resolution to kind of clarify this is what we should be doing to defend the Constitution. So here's his story that he's talking about in this interview about when he tried to put that forth.
15-page explanatory, statement about what each thing meant and everything like that, and it was just a 3-page resolution. Generic resolution about nullification that you could fill in Obamacare or whatever you wanted to put in there. And the whole resolution was only the words of James Madison and Thomas Jefferson.
This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore with DefendingUtah.org. We'll be back from the break talking about the most corrupt legislators in the state. You're listening to K-Talk, and this is the Liberty Lineup, The Naked Truth. We'll take your calls at 801-254-5855. Tell us what you think. Call us. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore from DefendingUtah.org. You're back on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com, with the Liberty Lineup, the Naked Truth segment, sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And we are talking about some major corruption in the legislature, people that are promoting themselves as being lovers of liberty, and they say all the right things, but their actions are completely different.
I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there, and perhaps not any in the whole United States.
So we've played that clip a couple times and getting into what is he talking about.
So we have Scott Bradley telling his story. If you missed the beginning of what we played before the break, he's telling his story on when he tried to put forth a resolution to the Utah legislature that would clarify what nullification is and why it is a good thing and why it is the most important thing that our legislators need to be doing right now. There are many important things, but it is the key one in protecting the liberties of Utah from an overreaching federal government. So we're going to continue in this clip of our interview here now.
I did not have to make up anything for it. And I explained that in my, kind of cover explanation. So I met with Kurt Oda and asked him if he would help run it through. And Kurt says, man, he says, I'm really not a constitutional guy, but I think I can get it to somebody that will do it, that will be good at it, and they'll be able to carry it. So I'm going, okay, fine. Well, anyway, comes back to me, he gave it to Ken Ivory. And Ken Ivory immediately deep-sixed it. He says, no, I'll write my own resolution. Well, they called me back and says, well, we can't run it. It's too long, 3 pages. So for crying out loud, how long is Obamacare, Anyway, it was too long because it was 3 pages, and they didn't understand it. And I'm saying, you know what? Number one, they didn't read it, and number two, they don't care to understand it.
Right.
So anyway, Ken Ivory wrote his own resolution that said nullification in the title, but it absolutely, unequivocally sidestepped the nullification issue and took a totally different approach. I mean, while it said nullification, it was absolutely not nullification.
So Ken Ivory destroyed that nullification resolution. It was almost as if he didn't want anyone to understand what nullification was, if I didn't know better?
That's what it sounds like.
But Ken Ivory deep-sixed that purposely because...
Purposely?
So Ken Ivory, he's a Utah legislator from West Jordan.
If nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Holy cow.
He's got to fight nullification, the actual remedy provided by the Constitution, for not waiting for everybody else to get involved. We can do this right here, right now, but he's got to fight it because he's got to put through his con.
We're going to talk about that in a minute after this clip a little more.
Right. Because we could kill each thing with a rifle shot rather than having to blow the Constitution apart with a shotgun. He did not want nullification to fly. He doesn't want anybody to understand it. They think it's racist, and it's basically out of the Civil War, and they've done that before, and it won't work. They don't understand diddly squat about it, but because Ken Ivory told them that, the other legislators believe that. See, he has this aura that he is the go-to guy on constitutional issues. That's what he's created himself with.
Right.
So, anyway, those just a few things of some pretty much first-hand knowledge I have, but I wasn't the guy that gave him the nullification one. Kurt was. So
that happened a lot. We had that same thing with the nullification of Obamacare. Kurt gave that to Ken Ivory, and Ken Ivory, of course, deep-sixed it again.
Wow, so we have two examples of Ken Ivory purposely taking a nullification bill and destroying it to make sure it doesn't work. And we have here a personal eyewitness testimony of why Ken Ivory is doing this. Ken Ivory is one of the biggest promoters of the CON, the Constitutional Convention, that we've talked about on this radio show before, which is something that is going to completely obliterate our Constitution. And the elite of this nation want that Constitutional Convention because
George Soros. Ken Ivory is supporting a George Soros program that he's funding.
George Soros wants the CON also. Liberals all over. In fact, the CON has been a liberal thing for many years.
Yeah.
And it's only recently that there's been a lot of propaganda to make it a conservative thing.
The neocons have come in and tried to promote this liberal agenda to try and sucker conservatives into going along with it.
There's a New American article called The Left and the Right Working Together to Rewrite the Constitution, and it really is the left and the right. When we had Bliss 2...
The fake right.
The fake right. That when we had Bliss 2 talking about that he said Hawaii even had a proposal to make Obamacare part of the Constitution directly.
And to repeal the Second Amendment. So it just gives you an example of the breadth of things there. So the point is the CON is going to blow away and destroy our Constitution. That is the insider's plan. They just need to get us hooked on it for any reason. And Ken Ivory really wants that CON. Bad.
And then this
in
is
fact,
why.
He's lied to people about it. Like, there's people that are against the CON that are funding his efforts. And he's promised them, he says, I won't promote it here in Utah if you keep giving me your money. And so they said, okay, they'll do that. And then what's he do? Goes to the legislature and testifies in favor of these Constitution-destroying proposals.
Ken Ivory puts the con in the con. So here is Scott Bradley's quote from our interview. This is it. This is why Ken Ivory fights nullification.
If nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Oh, man. So he's scared of nullification because nullification will restore our liberties. And he says, if people realize we have another solution and it works, then no one will want my con.
And we don't have to get 38 other states to go along with this. We can do this right now by ourselves. We can tell the feds to take a hike right now.
And again, if this is new to you as a listener, to understand the difference between nullification and a con, Scott Bradley also commented that in that little clip.
We could kill each thing with a rifle shot rather than having to blow the Constitution apart with a shotgun.
That's the difference. And nullification is done all the time.
It started with Jefferson, recognizing that the states created the federal government and that they're the final arbiters of what the Constitution means and what the federal government's authorized to do. And so it started back in the original Founding Fathers days, is done today. 21 states have nullified a national ID that was passed in 2003. It was supposed to be enforced by 2009, and they've dropped the ball on it. I mean, the federal government's kind of let it go because the people are saying, no, we're not going to do it.
If nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Okay, so Ken Ivory will do everything to destroy nullification. Let's hear that again.
If nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away. We could kill each thing with a rifle shot rather than having to blow the Constitution apart with a shotgun.
Nullification is the 10th Amendment. This is what all of our legislators need to understand nullification, and if they don't and they're unwilling to stand up for a nullification bill, then they're not good for liberty in the end. That is just a key piece of the puzzle that we need to test our legislators. So when the next election season comes up, that needs to be a question that we are asking them all the time. Do you support nullification, right? And look into voting history and have they supported it in the past? And even if many of them have to just start supporting it because it becomes popular, then great. We need legislators who will nullify. And in addition to the example we gave here, that Scott gave about his nullification resolution that Ivory destroyed, Ben briefly mentioned some legislation we were involved with, the healthcare nullification, that would have fully nullified Obamacare in Utah. And he destroyed that one as well. So he just can't take nullification. Now, we have a call on hold. It looks like we have...
If you've got any comments on this, give us a call at 801-254-5855. We've got Lisa from Cottonwood Heights has a question about Ken Ivory.
Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, hi, guys. I'm enjoying your show, and I didn't know all that about Ken Ivory, but I wanted to ask the question about what's going on in our valley here.
Yeah.
Concerning all of the apartment complexes that are being built everywhere. And I want to throw in the name of Mr. Robert Grow, G-R-O-W, who is the representative of, and I don't know what his title is, so I'll just say he's the chief representative of Envision Utah. And what I learned after reading Rosa Corey's book, The Green Mask, concerning Agenda 21 and then recently Agenda 2030,
right.
the money that's being used to build these apartment complexes is being given to the people who are the real estate brokers, of which Ken Ivory is one of the chief ones who's building these apartment complexes.
I don't think Ken Ivory's directly related. We want to keep that straight.
No, he's not directly related.
He's not a part of Ivory Homes. He's not.
Okay.
As far as we know.
Okay, well, at any rate, what I wanted to bring out is that this money, and he's just he's just a gentleman that's involved in a lot of stuff that I don't like.
Right.
And I believe that he is in cahoots with all these people because they are getting this free money from international banks. It's not even banks from this country to build these apartment complexes to change the scenery of our country and the personality of our country and our constitution of this country by flooding it with immigrants of other countries, and they may be legal, they may not be legal, or they could be just fugitives. We don't know. And this money that's being flooded into this valley is given without any very little strings attached to it, and it is a huge amount of money, and we're going to all pay the price because all of these people that are moving in here require everything that we require. And I don't think our valley, it's not that I'm against people being an immigrant. My husband is from another country, and it took him a long time to get his papers all straightened out and become a citizen, and he did it the legal way. But I just feel like that this is something that's going on, and no one is paying attention to it. And
well,
when they
I appreciate you bringing this up. It's something that, especially with Envision Utah, it's actually connected together with what we're talking about with Ken Ivory. He's a big part of pushing Agenda 21 with his lands transfer. It's actually bringing in and setting up a bunch of our lands to be off limits. And you talk about Envision Utah. They're using deception to get us to support these things. In their own studies, what they do, and this is in a report by the Brookings Institute, is they say we change the definition of words. We change what we're saying. So we say high-density housing, and we change that. So shoving people into these sardine cans, these apartments that are going up that Lisa talked about, and then what we call it instead of high-density housing, we call it housing choice. And so because in Utah, we like choice. And so you have this whole Agenda 21 thing getting on both sides, and, of course, Ken Ivory's a part of that. Thanks for calling. I appreciate it. Call again. And so it's important that we actually look at what these legislators are doing and not what they're saying. And so as we look into that, we were showing these clips of these experiences that Scott Bradley had with Ken Ivory, and other people have had these experiences, talking about how he pretends to be one thing to some group of people, but then when you see what he does, it's completely different. And Enoch's working on. We got some more clips on that.
Okay, so here again is Ivory, and the point is he doesn't want anybody else to understand nullification. So he's working in the legislature to take people who are either neutral or maybe even pro-nullification and make them not support it, again, because of his agenda with the CON-CON.
He did not want nullification to fly. He doesn't want anybody to understand it. They don't understand diddly squat about it, but because Ken Ivory told them that, the other legislators believe that. If nullification worked, all his arguments for a CON-CON went away.
Yeah.
And we have another interview we did.
So with this whole thing, there was a bill and Ken Ivory and Jacob Anreg worked together to kill this bill. There was a bill in the legislature that would have made Obamacare illegal. It wasn't just a postcard. This was an actual bill that would have made it prosecutable for anybody to implement Obamacare in the state. And so it's after that went through and they changed it and they killed the nullification. Ken Ivory and Bliss 2 of the John Birch Society had this experience that we're going to play for you right now.
Well, it's a 2-minute clip. Maybe we should do it after the break.
We have that? Oh, okay.
We have 30 seconds.
We have a break right now. Okay. So as we get that, it's important to understand kind of the background of what had happened. And so you've got Ken Ivory saying, I've got to kill these nullification bills. And, no, we've got it through anyways. Oh, crud, what do I do? So he writes a new replacement bill, what they call a substitute, and they make sure that... And so that they can say that they're doing nullification, but what they're actually doing is bringing in Obamacare to our state. We've got we are Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore, K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com. We'll bring you the clips of what Ken Ivory did to threaten others that are promoting nullification, threatening people, and using physical force to get them and intimidate them to not go along with nullification. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore from defendingutah.org.
The naked truth.
And we are back on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com, with the Liberty lineup, the Naked Truth segment, sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And before the break, we were getting into, and we've been talking about, some corrupt legislators that are saying one thing publicly and doing something completely different behind the scenes.
And we've interviewed some witnesses to things that have happened behind the scenes. We played one, constitutional scholar Scott Bradley, and now we have we interviewed Bliss 2, the regional field director for JBS, and he has his own personal experience that he told us on a phone interview.
And again, kind of some background of what was going on before this. So there was a nullification bill, and we've shown that Ken Ivory fights nullification. That's what he does. He wants to promote destroying the Constitution through a CON-CON, and so he brings up these, and so he supports and tries to kill any movement for nullification. And so,
if nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Exactly. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. It's and so what he did was he wrote a replacement bill to making Obamacare illegal. So right now we are discussing expanding Obamacare because of Ken Ivory in the state. And so after this legislative hearing where his replacement bill came in and got rid of the bill to make Obamacare illegal and made it about expanding Medicaid, he goes up to Bliss 2, who's a regional field coordinator for the John Birch Society, and this is the story that Bliss tells about what happened. And I saw this firsthand. We're working to get that on the over the. It got unplugged. There you go. Go ahead and press play on that.
Hello, this is Bliss 2, Regional Field Director with the John Birch Society. I was calling to relay that information about the time I talked with Representative Ken Ivory. I think it was the 2014 legislative session. There was a late committee hearing. Mr. Anderegg, Representative Anderegg, put in a substitution bill to substitute for a bill that was a nullification bill for the state of Utah to nullify the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act operations within the state of Utah. As I remember, Ken Ivory was there to testify in favor of the substitution bill that would have gutted the nullification and made it to just be a bill about Medicare. And so afterwards, I know he testified. I was out of the room at the time, but I came back in the room and the vote was held, and they voted for the new substitute bill. And I was up talking to a couple of legislators by their table, and Mr. Ken Ivory approached me, and I didn't know him immediately. And he told me, he kind of poked his finger at me and says, you need to tell your leaders to quit talking about nullification. And he says, there's a lot of lawyers here in the legislature, and we don't believe that nullification is proper or right.
There's a lot of lawyers.
I said, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Representative Ken Ivory. And then I remembered him. I'd met him once in Las Vegas at the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Convention that Richard Mack had held, where he was there speaking. And I said, oh, I see. And he said, oh, by the way, why don't you tell your members to write letters to their legislators and phone.
Oh, so we got that recording cut off. But so Ken Ivory was trying to tell him to write letters against the nullification, and he says, you better, poking Bliss in the chest, saying, you better stop talking about this, trying to bully other organizations to stop talking about what the Constitution says the states have the responsibility to do to defend itself against federal incursion.
Dang, well, why does it bother him so much that people want to nullify? Oh yeah, this is why.
If nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Bingo.
So we have a call from Chris in Springville.
Talking about Wayne Niederhauser.
Get him on the line here.
And Ken Ivory. Chris, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, according to Wayne Niederhauser, nullification is what caused the Civil War. We wouldn't want to have another one of those now, would we?
That's what Scott Bradley was getting into. Is they try to say that it's about racism or whatever, and that's one of the most ridiculous things. I mentioned before that nullification is about enforcing the Constitution. And Wayne Niederhauser, he's involved. Another one of those guys is a con guy. And why do they got to fight nullification?
Oh, I think
if nullification worked, all his arguments for a con went away.
Oh,
exactly.
So that would apply for Wayne or anyone who is promoting the con. Nullification would, because it works, then they don't need a con.
Exactly. They want to change the Constitution that's ignored instead of enforcing it. Isn't that weird?
Well, let me give you an illustration of what's going on here, and I'll use an analogy to do so. So a guy loses his wedding ring in the park, right?
Right.
And he looks and looks and looks all day, and then pretty soon nightfall comes. And he goes over a block away by the street where there's a light post with a light shining, and he begins to look for his ring there. And the guy walks by and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for my ring." And he said, "Well, where did you lose it?" "I lost it over there in the park." "Well, why are you looking over here?" "Well, the light's better." See, we look for answers where they don't exist because it's more convenient.
Right.
If we ever get a con, we all know what's going to happen. It's going to be HE double toothpick for the Constitution.
That's for sure.
We have no control over the delegation. We have no control over representation. It's going to be a big, huge mess. And that's why these guys are promoting it, because their superiors, the people who pay them, and we don't always know who they are because it's behind closed doors, they have told them that this is where they want to go.
This is what they need. Even though they ignore the Constitution, it's still there and in their way in a lot of ways. They've got to get rid of it, and that's why they're begging and they're fighting against nullification, because they need to have the con to really get their full grip. And that's why you've got nationally, you've got George Soros, and you've got locally, you've got Ken Ivory backing them up to do this stuff, and Wayne Niederhauser doing the same thing. And they're both involved in a lot of this Agenda 21 stuff as well. It's interesting how all these birds of a feather flock together.
You know, he used to be on the radio on Thursdays between 9 and 10 before you guys cut on. And I'm pretty sure I'm one of the main people that ran him off of K-Talk.
Good job.
Because I would call in, I would pose my question, and they would try to hang up, and I'd call right back, and they'd hang up again, and I'd call back. They didn't want to have anything to do with me because I had those tough questions, and eventually they just stopped showing up at K-Talk.
Politicians, for some reason, they just want to be told how good of a job they're doing. They don't want to be exposed on what their actual legislation does to us as the people.
Well, I will admit, I'm not paying my dues. I don't have millions of dollars to help with their campaigns, so I guess I only have myself to blame, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, hey,
all right.
Thanks, Chris, for calling. Call back.
No problem. Doing a great job, guys. Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye.
So we've got these, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, we can know the truth. And we've got 2 first-hand witnesses with their experiences showing what kind of bullying tactics that go on to get people to stop actually trying to enforce the Constitution. We've got this setup that's been used all throughout time, and they use these strawman tactics and try to link it to the Civil War, which is ridiculous. It's being used today. Thomas Jefferson
every session somewhere there are nullification laws passed on a regular basis,
and not just by the state legislature, but by local sheriffs and by juries nullifying unconstitutional and wicked laws. You've got right here in Utah, you've got the Iron County Sheriff told the feds, if you come in my state, in my county, without and try to go after one of my constituents, I'm going to arrest you. So you've got a sheriff threatening to arrest an IRS agent. That's nullification right there on the local level. And as individuals, whenever we say that's a wicked law, I'm not going to obey it, we're personally nullifying. Because as we learn in Frederick Bastiat's the law, is where does government get its authority?
From the people.
From the people. We learn that in the Declaration of Independence. It's the consent of the governed. We are the master. And so they can't. If I can't do anything, if I don't have the right to do something, I can't delegate that authority to my servant, the government.
And there are some things that we do have the right to do that we have delegated to government.
But we have to have that right inherently before we can delegate it.
Right. And the things that we have delegated, that's what the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution are about. Those enumerated powers are the valid authority of the federal government. And 80-90% of what they do is outside those enumerated powers.
Another champion of the con who fights nullification is Jacob Anderegg from Lehigh, who's also now running for the Senate this year. And he wants to get your vote, but instead of he fought the nullification bill, and even online in discussions on Facebook, he talks about how you've got the supremacy clause and how the state has to do whatever the federal government says.
Oh yeah, this is great. He said a whole bunch of things, well, before we get to what he said about the supremacy clause, which blows my mind, Constitution 101, we talked about how it's really a simple document to understand, and anyone can understand the Constitution enough to know when their legislators are doing the wrong thing, right? Even
Right.
if you're not a scholar. But so he was involved in that Obamacare nullification twist. He says he had a conversation online with us. And he said, "You're just upset because I modified the nullification of Obamacare bill, a bill that would have been found unconstitutional." Right? So he's claiming, nullification is unconstitutional, and he's admitting, I did that. He kind of did the dirty work, but again, from the interview we just heard, we know it was Ivory behind the scenes who was sort of orchestrating that. But it shows you Ivory's influence over Anderegg in this situation. And what did he say about the? Let's see what he said about the supremacy clause.
Well, you look at that. What if it was going to be ruled unconstitutional, which goes along with his supremacy clause claim? Then what's the purpose of the A, enumerated powers, and B, the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment saying, if we haven't given you authority to do this, you can't do it? That just strips the argument right off the bat.
The supremacy clause is valid within the enumerated powers.
Right.
When the Constitution says that the federal government can do this in pursuance of the Constitution, that means when you're dealing within the powers we've given you in this document. And that's where the supremacy clause is valid. So for someone to say, well, they can do whatever they want all the time, and that's what the supremacy clause means, shows either a willful twisting of the Constitution or just an ignorance of it. And many of us are ignorant of that until we just study it and read a book on it, and then it just makes sense. Or you read the Constitution itself, and it's like, I see what it's saying. But he claimed, nullification would have been defeated in committee, and if passed, found unconstitutional. Fact, Jacob Anderegg claims. Nullification is found constitutional all the time and is rarely challenged, right, when you have a state legislature that...
With the Real ID Act and the 21 states that nullified it, the federal government threatened them. They said, you guys won't be allowed to go on airplanes. That was back in 2009. Well, they just threaten stuff. They don't threaten to overthrow it because they know they can't. They just threaten to use their power to bully you. And so it's used all of the time. And we gave the example of the local sheriffs. You've got the examples of jury nullification. And you've got a case in Kansas. But
we're going to take a break.
As we're going, actually, we're out for the hour. Ken Ivory, 3 of the last 5 years, D and F grades from Libertas. That's something to remember. He is not conservative. He's not telling the truth. D's and F's for the 3 of the last 5 years. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore from defendingutah.org.
I cannot think of a more dangerous legislator up there